A 13-year-old boy walks into a motorcycle club with torn shoes and a question that stops everyone cold.
I don't want to be like my dad. Can I just watch how you handle things?
What happened next changed not just his life, but taught grown men what real strength looks like. The kid appeared on a Tuesday, right when the afternoon sun hit the garage bay doors at an angle that made everything look hazy and unreal. Micah stood just outside the property line, backpack hanging off one shoulder by a single strap that looked ready to give up entirely. His sneakers had more duct tape than rubber, and his jeans carried the kind of wear that came from necessity, not fashion. Terry noticed him first. He was elbow-deep in a carburetor rebuild when something made him look up. Just instinct, the kind you develop when you've spent years watching your back. The boy wasn't moving, just standing there like he was trying to decide if crossing that invisible threshold would cost him something he couldn't take back. "We got a problem?" Jax called out from under a Sportster, his voice carrying that edge it always had with strangers. Micah flinched but didn't run. That caught Terry's attention more than anything else would have. Most kids either ran or puffed up. This one just stood there, jaw set, like he was holding something too heavy to put down but too important to drop. "Looking for handouts, kid?" Jax emerged from under the bike, wiping grease onto a rag that had given up being clean years ago. "We don't do charity cases. I'm not asking for money." Micah's voice came out steadier than his hands. "I just want to be around people who don't solve everything by throwing punches or telling lies." The garage went quiet. Even the classic rock station seemed to lower its volume. Ranger emerged from the office, a tall man with silver threading through his beard and eyes that had seen enough human wreckage to fill a landfill. He'd spent 15 years as a corrections officer at a youth facility before finally walking away with all the stories he couldn't shake. "That's specific," Ranger said, crossing his arms. "What's your name?" "Micah." "Where are your parents, Micah?" "My mom's at work. She pulls warehouse shifts, gets home around 3 in the morning. My dad's in North Point." He said the prison's name without emotion, like he was giving directions. "Third time in 6 years. I'm 13, and I already know how this ends if I don't change something. So I'm here. Can I just stay? Do whatever jobs you need. I won't steal anything. I just need to see how different people work." Terry set down his tools and walked closer, studying the kid's face. He recognized the look, the one that came from memorizing arrest patterns and reading anger in doorway shadows, from already knowing which rooms had the best exits. "You casing us?" Chris stepped out from the office, suspicious by nature and profession. As treasurer, he'd seen too many cons start with a sympathy story. "No, sir." Micah looked Chris straight in the eye. "I live 4 blocks over, on Belmont. My school counselor said I needed positive male role models. I told her I didn't need role models. I needed a completely different instruction manual for being a person. She didn't have one. So I came here." Something in that answer landed. Maybe it was the precision of it, the way the kid had clearly thought this through. Or maybe it was the exhaustion underneath the bravado, the kind that came from carrying weight no 13-year-old should have to lift. Ranger looked at Terry, and some unspoken conversation happened in the space between them. Terry gave the smallest nod. "Here's the deal," Ranger said. "You can stay until dinner time. You'll organize tools and sweep floors while learning how we track inventory. Nothing gets touched without permission, and your mom gets a phone call tonight because we don't operate in shadows. And if anything goes missing, even a bolt, you're gone. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Stop calling everyone sir. We're not the military. Names work fine." Ranger gestured toward a section of the garage where tool chests lined the wall in various states of chaos. "Start there. Terry will show you how we organize things. And Micah, we're giving you a chance because somebody once gave us one. Don't make us regret it." Micah dropped his backpack against the wall and approached the tools like they were sacred artifacts. Terry handed him a rag and pointed to a socket set that looked like it had been organized by a tornado. "You know anything about wrenches?" Terry asked. "No, but I can learn." "Good answer." Terry almost smiled. "That's the only answer that matters here." As Micah began sorting through the scattered tools, the garage slowly returned to its rhythm. But everyone was paying attention now, watching this kid with the torn backpack who'd walked into their world asking for something they weren't sure they knew how to give. By the time the sun dropped low enough to paint the garage walls orange, Micah had organized 3 tool chests and learned the difference between metric and standard. He hadn't complained once. When his 2 hours ended, Ranger walked him to the edge of the property. "Your mom know you're walking home alone? She knows I can handle myself." "That's not what I asked." Micah looked up at the older man, something shifting in his expression. "She knows. She just can't always be there to watch." Ranger nodded. "See you tomorrow, then." Micah walked away, and his shoulders didn't curve forward quite as much as they had that morning. Behind him, the men of Dust Path MC exchanged glances, each one wondering the same thing. Had they just taken on a project that would save a kid? Or had that kid just started saving something in them they'd forgotten how to name? 3 weeks in, Micah knew the location of every tool in Bay 2 and could spot a stripped bolt from 15 feet away. But that wasn't what kept him coming back. It was the lunch breaks. The club ate together most days. Sandwiches from the deli down the street, leftover pizza, whatever Chris's wife packed too much of. They'd pull up crates and toolboxes like chairs, and the conversation would shift from torque specs to life in ways Micah had never heard men talk before. "You ever notice how anger's just fear wearing a mask?" Ranger said one Thursday, unwrapping a meatball sub. He slid a book across the workbench toward Micah, something about emotional patterns and behavioral cycles. "You want to be different from your old man? Start here. Understand what drives the pattern." Micah picked up the book like it might bite him. "You think reading's gonna fix anything?" "I think ignorance keeps you stuck," Ranger said. "Knowledge gives you options." Big difference. Terry wiped his hands and sat down beside the kid. "Your dad ever tell you why he made the choices he made?" "He said life dealt him a bad hand. Said the system was rigged. Said a lot of things that sounded good until they didn't." "That's the story people tell themselves so they don't have to change," Chris interjected, pulling out a ledger. He was always working numbers, even during breaks. "Micah, come here. Let me show you something." Chris opened the ledger to a page dense with numbers. Money coming in, money going out, what they owed, what they kept. "This is how money moves when you're not lying to yourself. See this? That's what we brought in last month. This is what we paid out. This is what we saved. No shortcuts, no schemes. Just discipline." Micah leaned in, studying the numbers with an intensity that surprised Chris. "My dad always said people like you had secrets, ways to game it." "The secret is there's no secret," Chris said. "That's what people don't want to hear. Success is boring. Just showing up, tracking everything, and not spending money you don't have. Your dad wanted magic. We're offering math." Something clicked in Micah's expression, not full understanding yet, but the beginning of it. By week 4, Micah started asking questions that had nothing to do with motorcycles. He wanted to know about Ranger's divorce, Terry's foster years, Jax's sobriety, the mechanics of rebuilding a life after it collapsed. The men answered honestly, sometimes uncomfortably so. They didn't dress up their failures or pretend the path had been straight. Jax admitted he'd relapsed twice. Terry talked about the years he'd spent sleeping in his truck because he couldn't trust roofs anymore. Ranger described the nightmares that still woke him up sometimes. Kids from the detention center he couldn't save. "You don't erase the past," Ranger told him one afternoon while they changed oil on a Road King. "You just stop letting it write your future. That's the work. Every single day." Then came the afternoon Micah brought Marcus. The kid looked worse off than Micah had. Black eye healing to yellow-green, suspension notice crumpled in his pocket, and an attitude that screamed, "Hurt me first so I don't have to wait for it." "This is Marcus," Micah said, standing a little taller than usual. "He's about to get kicked out of school for fighting. Can he hear the stuff you told me? About decisions and patterns." The garage went silent again, but this time it was different. This time they were looking at Micah like he'd just revealed something none of them had expected. He wasn't just absorbing the lessons, He was already passing them forward. Ranger pulled up another crate. "Marcus, you hungry?" The kid nodded, suspicious. "Good. We'll eat first, then talk. You don't learn anything on an empty stomach." Over the next hour, Marcus sat rigid as stone while the men talked around him. Not at him, just near him. They told stories about their own suspensions, their own fights, their own moments of almost destroyed everything. They didn't preach. They didn't lecture. They just existed as proof that the trajectory could change. When Marcus left, he wasn't transformed. But his shoulders were slightly less braced for impact. After he was gone, Terry pulled Micah aside. "You know what you just did? I brought a friend. You became a bridge. That's what leaders do. They connect people to possibilities." Terry paused. "Your mom know you're playing mentor now?" Micah's face tightened. "She doesn't really know I'm here at all. She works too much to ask questions." "That ends tonight," Ranger said, overhearing. "I'm calling her. She deserves to know her kid's doing something right." Micah looked panicked. "What if she makes me stop coming? Then we'll deal with that." But lying by omission is still lying, and we don't build anything real on that foundation. That evening, Ranger made the call. Tasha listened, skeptical and exhausted, asking questions that cut straight through pleasantries. By the end, she agreed to visit the garage on her next day off. When Micah showed up the next day, he looked lighter somehow. "She mad?" Terry asked. "She cried," Micah said quietly. "Said she didn't know I was trying this hard to be different. Said she's been trying too, just in ways I couldn't see." He picked up a torque wrench, turning it over in his hands. "Can I ask you something? Always. What if trying isn't enough? What if I still mess up?" Ranger looked up from his work. "Then you'll mess up. That's part of it. The difference is what you do next. Your dad messed up and blamed everyone else. You'll mess up and learn from it. That's how you break the cycle, not by being perfect, but by being accountable." Micah nodded slowly, something settling in him that hadn't been there before. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, and the garage lights flickered on. Marcus would be back tomorrow. So would two other kids from their school who'd heard something was different here. The club didn't know it yet, but the work had changed. It wasn't just about motorcycles anymore. Devin got out early, weeks before anyone expected, on a Tuesday that felt like any other until it wasn't. Good behavior, overcrowding, some bureaucratic shuffle that put him back on the street with a bus ticket and the same promises he'd made the last 2 times. Micah found out when he got home from the garage and saw his father sitting at their kitchen table like he'd never left. Same leather jacket, same apologetic smile, same hands that gestured too much when he talked. "There's my boy," Devin said, standing up with arms wide. "Look at you, taller already." Micah froze in the doorway, backpack sliding off his shoulder. His mother stood by the sink, arms crossed, face unreadable. "I didn't know he was coming," Tasha said quietly. "He just showed up an hour ago." Devin's smile dimmed slightly. "I'm still his father, Tasha. Still your—" "Don't," she cut him off. "We're not doing this again." But Devin was already moving toward Micah, hands landing on his shoulders. "I know I messed up, son. I know. But I'm different now. Got my certificate in electrical work. They had programs inside, and I actually finished something this time. I'm gonna make this right." Micah felt the old pull, the desperate hope that maybe this time would be different. That the man standing in front of him had actually changed instead of just changing his story. "That's good, Dad," Micah heard himself say. Over the next 3 days, Devin was everywhere. Walking Micah to school, asking about homework, talking about getting an apartment, making plans that sounded reasonable until you remembered he'd made them all before. Each conversation ended with the same question. "You're not hanging around those bikers anymore, right? That's not the kind of people our family associates with." Micah stopped going to the garage. Didn't call, didn't explain. Just vanished. On the 4th day, Terry noticed the absence like a missing tooth, obvious once you felt the gap. "Kid hasn't been here all week," he said during lunch. Maybe he got what he needed and moved on, Jack suggested. But Ranger was already pulling out his phone, calling the number for Micah's school counselor, a woman named Mrs. Hendricks who'd given him permission to list the garage as an emergency contact. Micah's father was released, Mrs. Hendricks said carefully. I saw them together yesterday. The boy looked conflicted. Ranger ended the call and stood up. I'm going to his house. Is that smart? Chris asked. Kid's got his dad back. Maybe that's what he needs. Or maybe he needs to know he's got options, Terry said, already grabbing his keys. I'm going too. They arrived at the small duplex on Belmont just as Devin was leaving for what he claimed was a job interview. The two men sized each other up in the driveway, Devin with the wary defensiveness of someone who'd been judged his whole life, Ranger with the steady calm of someone who'd done the judging professionally. You're the bikers, Devin said. Not a question. We're the guys your son's been learning from, Ranger corrected. Wanted to check in, make sure he's doing all right. He's fine. He's with family now. Real family. Terry stepped forward slightly. Family's the people who show up consistently, not just when they get released. Devin's jaw clenched. You don't know anything about me. You're right, Ranger said evenly. But we know your son, and we know he's trying to build something different than what you showed him. We're just here to make sure he knows that door's still open. Before Devin could respond, Tasha appeared on the porch, Micah behind her. The boy looked smaller somehow, like he'd folded back into an earlier version of himself. Micah can make his own choices, Tasha said, her voice carrying more steel than either man expected. And I've been watching those choices. The books you gave him, he's been reading them every night. The trade school program? He got accepted. Started 2 weeks ago. Devin turned to look at his son. You didn't tell me about any trade school. You didn't ask, Micah said quietly. Something cracked in Devin's composure. So what? These strangers know more about you than I do? They're better than your own father. They're not better, Micah said, voice shaking. They just show up. You don't dot. He stopped, the words catching. Don't what? Devin pressed, anger bleeding through the hurt. They don't make me feel like I have to choose between loving you and becoming someone different than you. The silence stretched until it hurt to breathe through. Devin looked at his son, then at the two men standing in his driveway, then back at Tasha who was watching him with exhausted eyes that had seen this pattern too many times. I'm trying, Devin finally said. He sounded more lost than angry. I know, Micah whispered, but I can't wait around to see if it sticks this time. Can't, Dad. I'm sorry. Devin left without another word, walking down the street with his shoulders curved forward in a shape Micah recognized, the same way he used to walk before he found the garage. Ranger approached the porch carefully. You okay? Micah shook his head, tears finally breaking through. I feel like I just gave up on him. You didn't give up? Tasha said, putting her hand on her son's shoulder. You chose yourself. That's different. That's actually harder. Terry nodded toward his truck. We're heading back to the garage. You coming? Micah looked at his mother. She smiled, small but genuine. Go. I'll see you at dinner. As they drove back, Micah stared out the window, processing everything. Does it ever stop hurting? He asked. Disappointing someone you love? No, Ranger said honestly. But you learn to carry it without letting it stop you. That's the work. When they pulled into the garage, Marcus was already there, organizing tools exactly the way Micah had taught him. He looked up and grinned. Thought you quit on us. Not a chance, Micah said, and meant it. The past had knocked. But for the first time, Micah hadn't opened the door all the way. Devin showed up at the garage less than a month later, and this time nobody was surprised. Micah was under a dyna demonstrating proper brake line inspection to two younger kids from his school when he heard the familiar voice cut through the garage noise. So this is where my son spends all his time. The music didn't stop. The work didn't pause. But everyone became aware the way animals sense a storm coming. Micah slid out from under the bike, grease-stained and steady. Dad, what are you doing here? Came to see what's so special about this place. Devin walked through the garage like he was inspecting enemy territory, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. Thought maybe I'd understand why you choose strangers over your own blood. Ranger emerged from the office, wiping his hands slowly. You're welcome to stay. Watch your son work. See what he's building. Devin laughed, sharp and bitter. Building? He's 14. He's supposed to be playing video games and doing homework, not playing mechanic with a bunch of... Careful, Terry said quietly, stepping closer. Choose your next words with respect. Devin's eyes flashed, and for a moment Micah saw it. The anger that used to fill their apartment. The coiled tension that preceded broken promises and slammed doors. His father was still carrying all of it, just wrapped in newer packaging. It's okay, Micah said, standing between them. He looked at Devin directly. You want to see what I'm building? Come here. He led his father to the workbench where a brake assembly sat partially disassembled, each component labeled with notes in Micah's careful handwriting. Beside it, a trade school textbook lay open, pages marked with sticky notes. This is a master cylinder. I'm learning how hydraulic pressure translates to stopping power. Next month, I start on electrical systems. Micah's voice didn't waver. Chris taught me how to track expenses. See this notebook? I've been logging every hour I work here, calculating what skills are worth in the job market. Ranger gave me books on emotional regulation and decision-making. I've read 4 of them. Devin stared at the workbench like it was written in a language he couldn't decode. I'm not playing, Micah continued. I'm preparing. For trade school. For apprenticeships. For a life that doesn't include waiting for someone else to save me or destroy me. He paused, his voice softening. I'm doing what you said you'd do every time you got out. I'm actually doing it. Something broke in Devin's expression. Not anger this time, but something rawer. Grief, maybe. Recognition of roads not taken. You think you're better than me, Devin said quietly. No, Micah replied, and he meant it. I think I'm luckier. I found people who showed me a different way before it was too late. You never had that. And I'm sorry for that, Dad. I really am. The garage had gone completely silent. Even Marcus and the other kids had stopped working, watching this unfold with the intensity of people witnessing something they might need to remember later. I wanted to be different, Devin said, and his voice cracked. Every time I really believed I would be. I know, Micah said, but wanting isn't the same as doing, and I can't keep waiting to see which one wins. Devin looked around the garage, at the men watching him without judgment but without yielding either, at his son standing taller than he remembered, at the life being built in this space that had nothing to do with him. I love you, Devin said finally. I need you to know that. I do know, Micah said, tears streaming now. But love isn't enough by itself. It needs action, consistency, and I can't teach myself those things from what you've shown me. Devin nodded slowly, backing toward the exit. He stopped at the door, looking back one more time. You're a better man at 14 than I've been at 38. That should make me proud, but mostly it just hurts. Then he was gone. Micah stood frozen until Ranger's hand landed on his shoulder. That took courage. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like I just broke something that can't be fixed. You didn't break it, Terry said gently. You just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. There's a difference. Over the following months, life found its rhythm. Tasha became a regular at trade school parent nights, her questions growing sharper each time: scholarships, certifications, apprenticeship timelines. She visited the garage too, sitting through a lunch break where the men treated her with the same straightforward respect they showed everyone else. Marcus brought in 3 more kids. Then those kids brought others. The garage instituted official hours for what they started calling open shop, Tuesdays and Thursdays, where anyone under 18 could come learn, ask questions, and watch men solve problems without violence. Micah completed his first solo break job on a cold Saturday in November. The entire club gathered to watch him bleed the lines and test the pressure, offering guidance but letting him own the work. When he finished and the bike rolled smoothly to a stop on the test run, the applause was genuine. "How's it feel?" Ranger asked. "Like I built something real," Micah said. He still didn't ride. At 14, he was too young, and honestly, the mechanics interested him more than the rebellion. The club wasn't an escape from family. It was proof that family could mean something different, something built instead of inherited. Devin called once a month, brief conversations that hurt less over time. He was working construction, staying clean, trying in his own broken way. Micah took the calls but didn't build his life around them. One Thursday evening, as Micah locked up the garage with Terry, a new kid appeared at the property line. Younger, scared, torn backpack hanging off one shoulder. Micah recognized the look immediately. "You lost?" he called out. "No," the kid said. "I just heard this was a place where people teach you how to be different. Is that true?" Micah smiled, the same way Terry had smiled at him months ago. "Yeah, it's true. Come on in. You know anything about wrenches?" "No, but I can learn." Micah handed the kid a rag, the same worn one Terry had given him months ago. "Then we'll start there. That's how it works." The cycle wasn't just broken. It was reversed, and that made all the difference. Sometimes the family you choose teaches you more than the one you're born into. What's a moment when someone believed in you before you believed in yourself? Drop it in the comments. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks for embracing the journey with us.